All right, so thanks for joining us today. My name is RC. Like I mentioned before, I'm from BuildOps, and I run our content and webinar programming over here. And if you're not familiar with BuildOps, we're the only all-in-one platform built for commercial contractors. We help teams manage everything from projects to services, operations, the whole thing. So you can check us more at buildops.com, and I'll give you a little more information about that in our email that I send out tomorrow as well. And before we dive in, I do also want to do a little quick little shout out to some of our existing BuildOps customers who I know are in attendance today. Y'all are pretty excited to see something that we'll be showcasing a little bit later on. So we will be doing that with the folks at Blue On. But first, we want to talk about a little bit more of a conversation that leads into that. So for that, let's introduce our panel. As I introduce this panel, I'm also going to pop up a poll. You'll see 3 polls throughout the entire webinar today. And just like the Q&As, it kind of gives us an understanding of what's top of mind for you and how to shape this conversation to make sure that it's most meaningful to you. So I'm going to kick off with first Jake, if actually, no, let's go with Justin first. Justin, if you want to introduce yourself, and I'm going to launch that first poll.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the opportunity, right, to be out in front of you all today. My background's more on the implementation side, so we're talking onboarding, support, integrations. I've been doing that in the construction software space for the last 10 years. Prior to that, my background's in construction, so I've been a field superintendent, project manager, estimator. So, on these type of conversations, I'll be bringing in sort of what my experience has been out in the field, as well as working with a lot of other build ops customers and what their experience has been out in the field. So RC, really appreciate the opportunity to join the panel today.
Yes, sir. Jake, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, RC. My name is Jake Pynick. I'm one of the product managers here at BuildOps. I'm responsible for the mobile application. Prior to being a product manager, I spent over a decade in the field, working in different industrial use cases. I've worked in semiconductors, automation. I've worked on wind turbines. I've worked at power plants, oil rigs. I've worked on frac equipment. Also helped run and implement best practices at some of those branches across our different regions that we had at the time. So the perspective I'm hoping to lend today is some of the lessons learned that I had over that period of time, and how I think about that when we are building out our product and our capabilities. And yeah, thank you for inviting me to the panel.
Yes, sir. And finally, Peter.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Peter Cappucciotti. I'm the CEO and founder of BlueOn. We're extremely excited to talk today about the partnership and integration of BlueOn's data and support into BuildOps. But my background, I spent about 20 years in the commercial real estate world, building about $30 billion worth of build-to-suit transactions across the country. So no commercial systems infrastructure extremely well. But the last decade been running BlueOn and building up this really unique platform that we kind of stumbled into, which is this huge need for technical data and technical support in real time for commercial techs in the field. Surprising to us, that hadn't been accomplished so far. So we've been excited to build that digital toolkit and been able to integrate it into folks like BuildOps. So it's really giving those field technical folks that Jake used to be the right technical information about that unit you're working on that will make that diagnosis, troubleshooting much more productive and easier, and get rid of the frustration and give you that confirmation through our tech support AI platform that you need to make the decisions in real time. So excited to talk that through today.
Awesome. I'm going to share the results of the poll in a moment, but actually, so for these webinars, we do a lot of prep talk, and just to make sure that we kind of know what we're all talking about. And so last week, a few of us got together to talk a little bit about what we should present today. And one of the questions I asked kind of got some interesting feedback from the folks who know more about this stuff than I do. And so I wanted to kind of to start off the conversation with that. So the question I had asked, I think specifically, was where did mechanical contractors lose the most time on a daily basis? And I think it was maybe Jake who brought up that's an interesting, the verbiage is interesting, because losing the most time versus what matters most. And we're talking a little bit more about billable hours. If you guys want to talk a little bit more about what is it that we're actually looking to maximize really here?
Yeah, I can take that. So yeah, it's an interesting phrase, right? Where are we losing the most time? Because I know when I was in the field, we used to track productivity like like you wouldn't believe. We had people scanning barcodes when they got into their truck. We had people scanning barcodes when they got to where they were supposed to be doing work. We got people scanning barcodes when they get to the top of the wind turbine. And we were really trying to track that productivity, minimizing the time waste, but still maximizing billable time, right? So it really is juggling that time between billable and non-billable hours, or hours that are allocatable at the time to our customers and the contracts that we had, versus hours that weren't allocatable to what we're able to bill. So I just brought that up and gave that feedback to the team, because I know sometimes we'll talk about like reducing hours or reducing time, but for many of us, that's not actually what we're incentivized to do. We're actually trying to balance that billable versus non-billable, um, keeping the hours there, but also making sure that our folks are productive as well.
Yeah, I think that's really good feedback. I mean, we have this conversation on a daily, if not multiple times a daily basis with folks that we work with in the field, because saving time is a difficult concept in the commercial world, because if you're getting paid for your time and it's allocatable, to use Jake's word, then what are you saving? You're still getting paid. So it's all about productivity, and how do you get more production out of those field staff, out of those service techs, in a way that produces more bottom line revenue or more margin, depending on the job. So it is a difficult question depending on how the contractor's set up and how they do their work, and are they doing T&M? Are they doing bid jobs? What is it? But ultimately, you want to be more productive and getting those technicians to be able to handle more revenue producing activity within their daily structure. But again, you can raise the temperature of conversations when you get into time, because people are like, well, I don't want to save time. I built my time. So it is an interesting conversation. But productivity, I think everybody can agree, is beneficial.
Yeah, and that productivity is really, in the folks that I talk to, relates to information, right? Whether that's information that they're capturing out in the field and giving to us back in the office, but a lot of times information from things that have already occurred out on the job site, right? So that we're not redoing any work, right? We're working from the latest and greatest. We've got the information that we need. And so, when I'm talking to folks about saving that time and being more productive, what comes up a lot of times is just information, and having that information be structured in a way that's easily consumable for the guys out in the field, because you could just bury them in a mountain of paperwork. That's not going to help them out. It's having that information, sort of that critical information, right when you need it. Just in time information is the way I try to think about that. And so, definitely excited about some of the other conversations that we're going to have today around that.
Yeah, real quick, just jump in there, because I think it's such a big point. One of the things, as we've been developing the ability to access this just-in-time data, which we'll get into in a bit, one of the big sort of questions is, how do you make that just-in-time data available to the 25-year-old and the 55-year-old in an easy to consume manner? And that is a challenge, but I think we've done a good job, and we'll talk about that later, about how to make it just intuitive, extremely easy, and not subject to the fat fingering paradigm that we all have to deal with on the job. But I think it's a big job. You can have all the data in the world, but if it's not accessible in an intuitive way, the frustration factor goes in and the guy doesn't want to use it, right? So you got to meet those two things together to make it successful. Data is one thing, but accessibility is probably more important.
I wanted to give some results from the poll here. So an overwhelming majority of folks on the call right now find that managing miscoms between the field and the office is one of the biggest delays that they see. The biggest, I guess, the best way to put it is productivity time sucks, if you will. Anyone want to talk a little bit more about like their own experiences with that, and how that's kind of introduced frustrations to them?
Sure. Good, Justin.
Yeah, I think all three of us probably got great stories on that. I'll keep mine brief, but because it's a recurring theme that I've seen over and over again, is it's not so much like what did you know, but like when did you know it, right? And we talked about that a little bit. And so when we're talking about rework in the field or lack of communication, that's typically because I'm working from bad or old information. And so, again, when we're talking about getting that information to the guys, making sure that it is sort of automatically being revisioned for them so that the latest and greatest are up at the top.
Yeah, Peter, you want to build
Go
on
ahead,
before I keep going?
I have a different topic, so you want to build it out and go for it, Jake? Yeah.
Yeah, I was only going to add, in addition to what you know and when you know it, it's who did you tell, and did you tell the right people at the right time, right? Because I think, those handoffs, in my experience, those handoffs can make all the difference between fixing something today or fixing something tomorrow or the day after. And getting back to productivity, I think that's kind of where communication is key between the field and the office, especially with some of the complex processes some of us have with like parts ordering or scheduling, and trying to drive some of those efficiencies. So I think that communication is absolutely key. And yeah, I could probably spend the rest of the webinar sharing war stories, but I'll turn over to Peter.
Well, before we do that, what is, like, in your opinions, I know obviously, we all come currently with technology on our hats a little bit. So like there might be some sort of skew here, but like trying to avoid the skew here. Is this a technological issue of why communications field office is such a challenge, or is there other like cultural, other systemic things within a company that can be improved that folks can apply when they leave this webinar today to make that pain point a little bit less painful for them, essentially?
I think it's a combination of all that. I mean, one of the things that we see, in our side of the equation is just the inherent nature of the complexity of the descriptions, meaning model numbers, part numbers, things that are just very long series of digits, right? Whether I'm on a 30-digit model number or a 12-digit part number, those are going to inherently going to get messed up, with someone's entering it manually, someone's communicating that downstream or upstream to a distributor or back to the office. We did a poll of 3,000 techs a year and a half ago, and we asked techs and distributors the same question, counter folks at distributors, and they both had the same answer of our biggest challenge is either getting the wrong part or giving the wrong part. Both sides, same exact, like 40%, big numbers, right, of these 3,000s. And that comes from, the Echo, Bravo, Tango, just communication over the phone of XYZ to the other side. So just resolving, that's a technological solution, just resolving the ability to communicate those numbers in a way that can't be lost and is traceable through the ecosystem. You get rid of a ton of problems right there, or the compatibility of that part. I mean, I was just blown away by the answers of those surveys and how many folks were, wasting inordinate amounts of time. Imagine getting the wrong part more than 10% of the time, right? That's just a disaster, right? And they're getting it 20% of the time. So
It's
just
kind of,
imagine what that does.
it's funny because so I'm not from the field, but I can relate in a very weird way, right? So like before there was OCR, before I could just like take a picture and it would read the letters, right? The VIN of my car and having to like copy that over to whatever the hell I had to copy to was a freaking nightmare. And that's a still like a little bit more finite than what this data that you're providing is. And I would mess up all the time. It's a freaking, and it's also just a pain. Like I leave it with a very ugly, like it's not a fun experience by any means, right? Like, yeah, interesting.
Yeah. It's frustrating for everybody, right? So it's so simple, but it's also just a huge problem, right, that needs to be resolved.
Yeah.
Yeah. RC, getting back to your question, is it cultural? Is it technological? Look, I got to say, in my experience, I haven't been part of a team that doesn't want to collaborate and help each other, right? They're usually the teams that we're on in the field, like we're team first. We want to help each other. We want to make sure everyone's safe and has the information they need. So I think culturally, those pieces are usually in place. I think technology helps that, right? And I think the things that Peter's alluding to helps to ensure that we're trying to remove as much friction as possible, in enabling the team to communicate from the field to the office or even just within the field. But no, I think it's, as Peter mentioned, I think it's a combination of all those things. And that's why I think it's so difficult to crack, really.
Is part of this like, so if teams are by nature willfully wanting to collaborate and communicate, it's going back to this idea, like, then is part of the issue also generational, right? Like the way that that someone who's in their 50s might communicate is much different than the way in their 20s. And so like while the best intentions are there is some sort of communication gap, right? Like there's a way that's a friction for both ends. Like, right, like a 25-year-old, I mean, for all the attendants, I'm not trying to I'm not trying to generalize, and let's just do it for simplicity's sake, right? Like, but like a 25-year-old might not want to read a paragraph because it's way too much information, right? Whereas a 55-year-old might not want to just use whatever it may be, like that the 25-year-old might be easier. So is that part of the issue, is right? Like the intentions are there, but there is some generational potential friction, right?
Yeah, I mean, historically, the tools haven't been accessible, right? It's like we kind of forget, but it was whatever, 10, 12, 13 years ago, there weren't really smartphones, right?
Right.
It's like whenever I got out of the field and sort of came into construction technology, we were still server based, right? You would like people would buy
Oh wow. Yeah.
CDs of programs and install them, and every quarter you would do a mailer and everybody would get new CDs. That wasn't that long ago.
No, it wasn't.
It really wasn't, but it's like it's literally seems like forever ago, but it really wasn't that long ago. And I remember when the first mobile apps came out, and it definitely was. There was definitely a generational divide there. It's like I like to use my dad as an example, right? He's a contractor from way back in the day, and I remember he went down kicking and screaming from his flip cell phone, right? He didn't want a smartphone, he didn't want anything to do with it. Like, it's like, listen, Justin, it's got too many buttons. I go, Dad, you've hold on to this thing so long, there's no other options. There's literally he made it, for a long time on that old Nextel with the push to talk,
Oh
like
yeah,
he
yeah.
thought that was
Love
like
it.
the new,
Love those things.
he loved those. I mean, I love those things too. That's when I
Yeah.
got out of the field. That was the latest technology, was the push to talk. That said, within a week, I'm getting pictures of his garden. He's asking me about the latest Mike Rowe podcast. I'm like, how do you even know about this? He found an app where he can listen to Dragnet, old Dragnet radio broadcasts. He can listen to those on his cell phone now. That said, there used to be, for sure, when I first got into this, used to be a generational gap. Nowadays, the cell phones have been out there long enough. The networks have sort of grown to be able to um, utilize this horsepower, because back in the day it'd take 20 minutes to upload a picture. Now it's like you're streaming 4K video in real time. So now we can have this data transfer. The technology has been in the folks' hands. So historically, I've seen it be a technology problem. At the very beginning, there was sort of a gap there. But in general, software should be like a joke. If you have to explain it, it's not any good. So bad software, it doesn't matter if you're old or young. It's just not going to work for you.
That's a good
Great
point.
point. Great point. Great point. One of the other responses on the poll had to do with job documentation. So I'm going to launch a new poll right now just to get a little bit more intel on documentation, job site documentation, and how to search and find for that. So I'm going to launch that poll up. If you all can give us more intel on that, it'll help us shape that conversation as well. Here it goes up there. Question for you all. First of all, a little statistic. This is more general and not specific necessarily just to commercial trades, but on average, workers spend about 2 hours a day just looking for information, which is about like 10 hours a week, right? That's a ton of money. Personally, I think that for what I do for a living, I think that's on the low end. Honestly, like I spend a lot of my time throughout the day just looking for information. Now, how does that simplify in my world? I'm not quite sure, but I know there are tools and processes in place for the folks in attendance today to kind of minimize this impact. You all want to talk a little bit more about like what's being done to ensure that people are not wasting so much unbillable time just searching for information?
Who's it? Like that? That me?
Yeah, sure. Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah. Well, certainly, that's the reason why Bluon to some extent exists, which is to catalog and index all that information that you may want. The challenge in HVAC, in mechanical contracting in particular, is the data is shockingly fragmented and incredibly opaque, meaning many OEMs have purposely concealed the data over years. Many have lost the data. So the information of what you want to gather about a 2006 RTU that's on, X building is very difficult to obtain. It shouldn't be. Like, it doesn't make any sense that it is, but it is. And so we've spent the last 6-7 years accumulating all that information. So whether it's the wiring diagram, the error codes, the troubleshooting guide, the product data, the bill of materials, the specs, the cross-reference parts of that spec, whatever it might be, that information, which is just a giant amount of data, if you can put it in a place that can be accessible, brand agnostically, and very simply to access, you get rid of that hunt, particularly in mechanical, because you're dealing with stuff that's 20, 30 years old on the regular. That's a regular Tuesday, as you got two 20-year-old units, and that data is just hard to come by. So being able to find it, index it, access it, zoom in, zoom out, search, ask it questions about that data, just is not only is it a time saver, but the frustration of that field staff in the field just getting pissed off trying to find it, just get rid of it, right? And now you're smooth sailing. You turn that anger into benefit, and they're just marching forward and they're troubleshooting without that big friction point. It just sounds easy, but 7 years ago when we started this task, we were naive enough to think it was easy. Turns out not so easy. There's like 25 million unique models in the field in the US. Unique. That means unique design architecture. That's a ridiculous amount, right? So we are definitely not a country of conformity. Everybody's got a different piece of equipment with a different set of systems and design and parts. So accumulating that has been very difficult, particularly because you have so many OEMs that have been hoarding it in different manners. So long-winded answer that the information should be easy. It hasn't been easy. We're making it easy, and finally, you can access it without having to, fight the system to get it.
I'd add that, I remember being back in the field with paper before technology. We'd have our flip phones, and Justin, I can still get a push to talk Nextel on eBay, just saying for anybody who still wants one, because old school like that. But I still remember we would have people who in the office would help build these packages for work, including the documentation to save us that time, because it was identified even back then as such an important thing to make sure that, one, we're not only saving time, but two, we're preparing our personnel to be the most effective when they get there, right? Now, after a while, I think everyone on the webinar would probably agree, after a while, you get familiar with the documentation. You know what you need, when you need it, and you probably don't need the full packet all the time. Maybe the newer folks do. But I think that's where, to Peter's point, technology, like the things that Bluon's been doing, has really helped, because now, it's when you need it, you're able to find it. You're not having to spend the time to search for it, and you're not having to try and figure out, well, how experienced is this technician or this field person? How much information do I need to provide them ahead of time or not? And even when we would provide it, some of it would be, there'd be a revision in the field, or an upgrade or a retrofit, or something would happen to the asset where we wouldn't have the upgraded documentation. I think technology helps us there as well. So yeah, I would just want to add that to what Peter said.
Oh, I thought I was on mute for a second. All right, not on mute. We're gonna do a little, get a little more intel and showcase a little bit more about what we just kind of talking about on a theoretical level in a moment. But I did want to bring, I just said that really fast, so hopefully you all caught that. But I do want to share the results of the poll as well. So not surprisingly, a large number of you, 40% of you, say that getting the field and office on the same page with documentation, that goes back to the last one, right? Like that was the number one pain point you all felt anyway, is this like the communication between field and office. So it makes sense that's one of the biggest ways you handle the documents today, but also keeping all our projects organized across projects is the biggest challenge. That's 46% of you said that. Keeping all documents organized across projects is your biggest challenge. So I appreciate that input. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. So we've been talking more on experiences you all have done on your own as contractors in the field, and also as makers and shakers of technology on how to solve some of these problems. But I would like to now hand the keys over to the rest of the panel to talk a little bit more about specifically what is possible here with technology, with BuildOps, and with Bluon. So Justin, I believe that you'll be starting off.
Yeah, definitely. I'll kind of kick us off, and then obviously the rest of the folks on the panel have got some great insight in here as well. But kind of one more important thing to call out. Over here on the left, I've got my cell phone, right? And then over here on the right, we've got the back office type of view. So, back office over here, mobile app, mobile phone over here on the left. Now, what's nice about the BuildOps app in particular, it's available for both Android or Apple devices, whether those are phones or tablets. So we're pretty agnostic when it comes to that. And we want that information to be accessible in the technician's hands. So there's systems out there today, or, folks are maybe saving this to a shared drive, or you have in some sort of Excel spreadsheets where maybe back in the office, they'll be able to see a list of the equipment on site. But again, the tough thing is making sure that's available for the guys out in the field as well. So no matter where they are within the mobile app, up here at the top, we've got a search. So if they're searching for a particular asset for, a site that they're on right now, or a site that might be somewhere else, they're able to go ahead and search that up. We can also see this in context of a call in particular. So I've got a call out here to go to the surgery center. If I pop that open, right, I can go ahead and log into that job if I needed to, see any sort of important notes like door codes, gate codes, things like that. Also, we can view past jobs that we've done out here on the site and see what previous technicians have left notes, what work we've done. That's all kind of on the site location, but really wanted to hone in on the equipment side of things. So, I've got a list of the equipment that's here on site. If for some reason I need to add an additional piece of equipment because it's not loaded, I can take a picture of that data plate, and it'll scan the make, model, and serial number and add that in here. So again, I'm not having to enter that information, manually from scratch. And then even if I want information about a particular unit that I'm working on, if I pop open, in this case, RTU1, I can see the full service history of that unit, what was done, who worked out there, see their notes and pictures that they've left. I can also see what areas of the building does it service, what related parts, right? Because all different belts and filters, Peter sort of mentioned, there's no sort of standardization across the board here. We've got all sorts of belts and filter sizes and refrigerant that this equipment's taking, so we can see a look at those. Also, sometimes there'll be like a parent-child type of relationship between one asset and another. Previous folks from our company that have been out there, maybe they've given us some recommendations to the customer. Hey, listen, y'all need to change out the blower motor, or hey, we've got a excessive amp draw here. Also, when we're talking about being productive, I don't want to have to do rework, right? So have we already quoted this to the customer? And I just need to let them know, hey, you've already got an outstanding quote. Now, let's say I'm out there and I'm troubleshooting this work. Based on the make, model, and serial number in our integration with Bluon, Bluon's going to suggest, right, what possible unit we could be referring to here, right? Because there's a lot of these things, there's a lot of parity. So we want to let you know, hey, here's a couple different options, for that unit. And Bluon will go ahead, or with our integration, we'll pull down the different manuals that you might need for servicing that unit. So if I pop open this manual section here, maybe it's product data, maybe it's operation and maintenance, maybe it's a wiring diagram. I can go ahead and pull those open, and now as the technician, I've got all that information at my fingertips. The full service history for that piece of equipment, any related parts, any open recommendations or quotes, as well as any of the manuals in there as well. And last but not least, we've got the co-pilot in here as well, which is going to be leveraging that integration to help us be a little more proactive with the searching for different pieces of information. So this is something that Peter and Jake could put a ton of time into in general, this integration. So I want to kind of turn it back to you, Peter, and kind of give us a little bit of background on how this information is coming over and how you see it being useful.
Yeah, appreciate that, Justin. So yeah, I mean, the information is really deep, and I think the integration is we're in beta and it's getting better and better to make much of this information as easily accessible as possible, and Jake can talk about that. But in general, as Justin pointed out, for the vast majority of units that you're going to scan in or have already scanned in. So whether it's historical data or new data that you just popped an asset in on job X, we're going to be able to provide you for that particular model. We're going to be able to give you all the specs of that model. So that's going to be everything you would assume about the specs, the voltage, the size, the metering device, the belt size, the filter dryer size, the air filter size, the voltage, anything that's the relative spec, the refrigerant type. All these things that are, simple but very meaningful, in the field. When you need that data, you need it. And then we're also going to be able to give you, as you walk through, all that documentation, which can range from a few manuals to 5 or 6 or 7, depending on the piece of equipment. And then last but not least, you're going to be able to see the bill of materials, which I don't know if you pulled up here or not, Justin, but the bill of materials, which is every part that is in that model. So usually 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 parts are going to be displayed. And for each one of those parts, you're also going to get the specifications of that part, which again is a ton of data. And then here's the real kicker, which I'm not sure if we can show this or not. Jake, let me know. But we have the cross-reference data, meaning, you're going to go, as everybody on this call who's been in the field knows, you rarely replace part A with part A. It's some other compatible version of part A, a supersede, an aftermarket, a newer version, what it might be. We have that data. So you have a 1997 RTU. Here's the original OEM blower motor. Well, guess what? Here's 20 other ones that are the exact same part or a superseded part that you can buy that accomplish the goal. And we can tell you it's a perfect match, a spec-based match, or a modification match. And we give you a note to tell you what has to be modified to make that particular part compatible in that instance, in that model. So that data is extremely powerful for the technicians in the field who are struggling with either older equipment or difficult of replacing that OEM part with the OEM exact part replacement. So again, for every model in there, you're going to have all that data. And additionally, as we showed you in that co-pilot, besides that being an access point to all the data I just mentioned, so you can sort of talk to it like an AI chatbot, what's the blower motor, what's the spec, so we'll give it to you. But more importantly, it's got the brains of 35 of the best mechanics in the market that had been answering tech support calls for 5 years. 100,000 plus calls have been answered by this team. We were able to take all of that wisdom that those 30, 40-year vets had in their brain, and because we recorded their conversations over a 5-year period of time, we built the most robust set of training data for an AI. So you can ask that chat bot pretty much any question you can imagine regarding that piece of equipment. It knows what you're working on, so it simplifies it based upon that particular model. You can ask it diagnosing questions, troubleshooting questions, even super nuanced questions. You'd be surprised at what it knows, and it will help guide you, through that diagnosis situation. At the very least, it's going to confirm your thoughts on how you're going about that and give you a second set of opinions on where to look and where to check. So it's extremely robust in terms of its ability to provide that feedback. And the more you play with it, the more you'll see that. But at the end of the day, we're here to give you that technical data and that support you need, without having to search or having to fumble around and get that job underway. I don't know if you can show some of that, Jake, or not.
No, we have what Peter's talking about with the parts, the exact match, the OEM preferred match part, and so on, to guide the technician when they're communicating with the office, like we talked about before, right? Making sure that the right information is being communicated to various folks in the office or in the field, so we have that information there. Additionally, one of the things that we've been trying to do or trying to think of in the technician's daily workflow is making this as available as possible, which is why Copilot persists at the bottom of that asset view. And you're able to then save the manuals and documentation there for the asset, which will then show up as a record for anyone else looking at the asset. But that's meant to really streamline and streamline the tech's workflow and remove the time they spend looking for information. Because as we all talked about before, the hours they spend looking for information when they need it, and really just that feeling of being prepared when you have to make a decision, you have to be able to finish your work, is why we've really positioned it in the product the way that we have. I think.
Let me jump in there real quick, Jake, on one point to make. So, this integration is really a game changer for a bunch of reasons. We've been supplying this information to thousands and thousands of contractors and tens of thousands of technicians, over the last, 3, 4, 5 years. And it's been very great for us to figure out how to give that information to those technicians in real time. But all of them, virtually all of them always said, hey, this is great data, but it would be so much more valuable if it lived inside my field services, my FSM platform. So I'm not going back and forth, and it's just right there in my workflow as I need that data or that information. So that's what we're so excited about this, because it's sort of, a kind of a dream come true to put this data right where it's needed in real time without having to, go back and forth or have any other thoughts. It's just there when you need it. You don't have to think about it. It's available as a part of that work order. And that's the, the 1 + 1 = 5 kind of equation here, where the data is great, the support's great, but it's even much more valuable if it's given to you within your own workflow without having to go back and forth.
Thanks for hitting on that, Peter.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to show this to a number of folks across the country, and every time I do, it's essentially the same exact feedback. It's like, where has this been, right? It's like, is this real, right? I kind of get that a lot. People sort of look at it in disbelief, and the reason why we're able to provide sort of such valuable, such focused data is really, build ops and the partners that we have are really hyper focused on, specific market segment, right? We don't sell to dog walkers, right? We don't sell to we don't sell to landscapers, right? It's like very specific who kind of benefits from these feature sets. And it's because we have that market focus, we're able then to bring back those really impactful features. And Jake and his team do a great way of packaging that all together so that it's easy to consume. Sort of one thing you pointed out, RC, based on your familiarity with technology, really I just pick what the piece of equipment is. And again, we're not trying to bury this stuff behind multiple windows, right? We're not trying to bury it behind sort of some additional knowledge of the system. You can just straight scroll through it and have all that information at your fingertips. And I think what Peter and his team have done in allowing us to partner with them is really making a meaningful impact to some of the folks that are, which we need to keep the most productive parts of our team, which is the guys out in the field.
Yeah, this onboarding experience, the way that it's being packaged up in the platform, the onboarding experience is basically just plug and play, right? It exists. It is just there, and that is the ultimate goal with technology, as you mentioned, Justin. It should be like a joke, right? Like you shouldn't have to explain it. Just I did pop up a poll question related to this feature, and not one person said they didn't need it. So like literally not one person. So clearly there's a need for here. Clearly there's a desire to get some of this accessibility within their own workflows. So just Justin, if folks, first of all, I will be sending out an email to everyone here. So I think it'll be tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. That will include, Jake, if I'm right, a little bit more detailed videos that we can link out to, right? So you'll get a little bit more dedicated video. So you'll get a deep dive more into this that you can actually share with the rest of your team if you want to as well. By all means, go for it. In addition, I will. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. If folks want to know more about this Blue and BuildOps integration and feature, Justin, what should they do? Where should they go?
Definitely need to reach out to your reps over here at BuildOps, right? If you're working with a rep already, whether that's your if you're a prospect who's evaluating BuildOps, or if you're a current customer and you're working with your account manager or client success manager, they'll be able to kind of funnel you up the appropriate ladder, right? If you don't have a contact already with BuildOps, sales at buildops.com is always a good one to kind of get in touch with us in general. And, we're happy to take questions. And sort of as Peter and Jake had pointed out, what I'm showing you today is kind of like version 1, right? This is sort of, this version 1 stuff. There's some additional great features that we're able to partner together with Blue to bring our team, because there's a lot of overlap with our customer bases, and sort of bringing those two solutions together, I think is something something awesome that we're able to do.
Yeah, you nailed it, Justin. Peter and his team and our team here at BuildOps been collaborating really closely. And, we've had a set of beta testers playing around with this. We've been taking their feedback. Bluon and our teams have been trying to collaborate and figure out how to respond to some of that feedback. So we do have a future roadmap of things that we know we're going to be enhancing going forward. And I think that's the other beauty of this partnership is both committed to making this experience as great as possible for the technician in the field, also connecting them with the folks in the office and enriching their data and existing data sets in the future to make sure that they're the most productive as possible.
Yeah, that enriching data is a really big deal, right? We didn't really hit that, but what that means is, you might have a list of 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, assets, depending on the size of your shop, and you got the model and the serial, maybe one spec if you're lucky. We could take that data and spit it back at you, and now you got, the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 key specs and key parts that are relevant to that piece of equipment. It's going to make your PM contracts, service contracts, all of that that management just so much more productive to have that information to know, even to just basic stuff, refrigerant type, age, number of circuits, what's even that basic information, which typically is not there, we can provide rapidly with an asset enrichment protocol. And one last thing, just to jump in on what Jake was talking about on moving the ball forward, one thing I was just going to mention is, for example, in the chat bot, we know the current way, when you can see the videos Jake's going to send, we'll show you, how it gives you a very specific list of actions to try. Is it this, this, and this? Try this, this, and this. Sort of like as almost like a training methodology to a less than 10-year experienced tech. What we're also doing is we're creating a conversational mode for those senior techs who don't want all of the information. They just want the quick feedback, the 1-sentence reply that says, yep, check that, or no, don't check that. So that's going to be available like on a toggle. So you'll be able to, pick the conversational mode or the more in-depth mode for the folks who want to know, the details and the step-by-step. But we've gotten that feedback from the field that the senior guys like, hey, this is great. I don't want to read, 10 bullets. I just want to know the one bullet that was the number one thing to check. And so that's just a great part of feedback, how we make this better for all parts of the team.
Incredible. Awesome. I want to respect the folks' time, so we're going to start wrapping this up. There's a bunch of questions out there, and I apologize to folks like Nick and Jamie and Roger, all you all. Some of you are customers, some of you are prospects. We can't really fit it all in right now, but we will get back to you. If you are an existing customer, yes, you could reach out to your success manager as well. But we will try to make a point to follow up with as many of you as we can after this webinar as well. So I appreciate your time. Any last final words from anyone before we sign off for the day? Sweet. Okay, awesome. Folks, I really appreciate your time. Again, you'll get the recap of this. So I'm going to print out a recap of this as well as the webinar in totality tomorrow. You should get at least one, if not maybe a couple different Loom videos that kind of deep dives into the product a little bit more for you as well. Again, feel free to share with whomever you want to. So be on the lookout for an email from me tomorrow. If you don't get one by the end of the day tomorrow, then reach out to sales@buildops.com still regardless. And we'll get you that information. I promise you. You never know, Gmails and stuff like that with spam. So anyway, appreciate everyone's time on here, the panel, the audience, everyone like that. Super excited about all this stuff, and look out for future webinars as well. And thank you so much. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Take care all.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.